Hi, welcome back to Say Yes and to my third episode in our latest complimentary online dog training webinars. In my first video, I asked you to become more consciously aware of any of the times that management was taking you away from really good dog training opportunities. I suggested that you become more conscious of the decisions that you were making when you were managing your dog's unwanted responses. Now, looking at us humans from your dog's point of view, even though we may think it's completely disgusting when our dogs choose to roll in some nasty smelling carcass they found in a field, we need to consider that from our dog's point of view, maybe they think that we're the weird ones when we freak out at the sight of them doing something that comes completely natural to them. It's a classic clash of desires. In the second video, we learned how to get away from the simplistic role of using food only as a bribe or prompt with your dog to the energizing way that choice should be used to supercharge the value of those rewards and empower your dog to participate in the whole process with you. What we really have to do as dog lovers is to seek a common ground where we fit into each other's lives more harmoniously. Stepping away from the potentially combative nature of a relationship of blame and moving towards a place where our wants align with our dog's wants. This leads to a more effective, less stressful life together with you and your dog. Hopefully by now, you'll have already set a goal to moving away from managing and scolding towards living a life that we like to call do land. Now, do land is a place where the focus of all training is to reward good choices you want to see being repeated in your dog. The land of don't is managing the dog's poor choices with stern reprimands like no, don't, leave it, ah. Here in do land, training is built in strategic layers where choice and high-value reinforcement work to create that clarity I've been talking about all along. It's a place where we constantly strive to synchronize our dog's desires with those of our own. Here, your dog doesn't need to be told not to run up to kids that are playing in the park. He'll see those kids playing and he'll look to you for permission to go and visit. He won't be breaking his sit stay in the agility ring, but he'll be keenly waiting for you to engage him in one of your many start line games. You have replaced reprimands and blame in your relationship with your dog with an ongoing evaluation of expectations and joy. And when you get stumped, you immediately look for new knowledge to help rise you up to a higher level of understanding in order to nurture this new relationship that you have going on with your dog. Synchronized desires between you and your dog. That is the ultimate goal here. Choice is the critical component to create this synchronicity. Now, when I was younger, a teenager, I had certain housework chores that I had to do every week. I'm sure you had the same. You got the lure of an allowance for doing them. I think it would have been difficult to have made scrubbing the kitchen floor addictive, but I actually grew to really hate not just those chores, but anything to do with housework. I was told that I had to do them. By way of contrast, when I was about the same age, I started experimenting with cooking. My mom, who herself was not a massive fan of cooking, loved my experimenting and made a big deal anytime I decided to cook dinner for the family. She gave me the reward not only of the attention raving about the food I'd prepare and how I did it, but giving me the added bonus of no chores that night because I cook supper. Is it any wonder that today I have a house cleaner and I've had one from the moment I could afford to hire one, but I rarely go out to a restaurant because I much prefer home-cooked meals. Choice helps to develop attraction because you've made the small steps towards choosing your own future. The same is true in the workplace. You know, most businesses have a way of really souring their employees to the point where the workers clock watch as the time winds down at the end of their workday, and many of them actually check out mentally long before that point. However, there are other corporations, like Google for instance, that's developed a culture that empowers their employees to the point that they take on ownership of the success of their businesses. I think you'll find that the role of choice versus overbearing rules play a big part of the success of those types of corporations. If when I'm competing in a highly energized agility competition, my dog doesn't want to wait at the start line, he doesn't want to hit a weave entry or drive to the bottom of his contacts, there's going to be nothing that I can do or say at that moment to change his mind. I need to be able to rely on him to make the correct choices in the heat of that highly charged atmosphere. The same can be true of a dog who hears you call his name at the moment he's chasing a squirrel towards a busy highway. Choice in our training builds in a clarity of expectations. And of course, this clarity creates confidence, enabling the dog to not only be capable to do what I ask, but because the skills have all been grown up around his choices, he now wants to do what I ask. If our desires have been synchronized, then all of my dog's energy, focus, and intense drive won't be fighting against me, but it's going to be going into exactly what I want him to do. Here, we're a team. Here, there's harmony. And here, there is no limit to what we can accomplish. That's my goal for my relationship with my dogs. If that kind of relationship resonates with you, it's time to stop fighting your dog's natural drives and start synchronizing your desires. Today I'm going to lead you through my 5 keys to creating a framework that puts choice at the center of all of your inspired training. Point number 1. You have to know exactly what you want. Document it in great detail, exactly what you want to see from your dog. Not in general vague terms like, I want a well-trained dog, but in really specific details, such as, I want my dog to come when he's called. And I only call his name one time, under any distractions, regardless of how far away I am or what he's doing at the time he hears me. I want him to race back to me as if he was chasing a squirrel. Have it in mind, have that goal in mind, exactly the behavior, or if there's a lot of things that you want to change, the behaviors that you want to see made different than what you've got right now. Point number 2. Visualize the benefits for creating this outcome for yourself. Write them down on a piece of paper as if you were on your way to already achieving them. Again, be very specific. For example, you might write, once my dog learns to always come when he's called, he's going to be able to enjoy more freedom on our walks in the woods. I'm going to be more relaxed when walking with him near traffic, and I'll be content knowing I can recall him away from any danger in his life if the need ever arises. Once you have this list of all those benefits, stick it up somewhere so that it'll be on your daily radar to review ongoing. Those are the reasons you're putting in those extra time to come up with fun games to get you where you want to be with your dog. Point number 3, be aware of the role of stress or distractions in your training. When I'm lecturing around the world, people often freak out when they hear the term stress because it's associated with something bad. They think it's a terrible thing, but the truth is stress is an important part of learning. The word distraction is more commonly used in place of stress, but really what we're doing is controlling training stress for your dog. Now, following are 3 categories of stress or distractions that you can add to your training, but add it strategically in order to improve your dog's understanding. Number 1, duration. This would be the stress you add when you extend the period of time you're asking your dog to perform any skill. So for a sit stay, you might start at 3 seconds, add layers of complexity and good choices to grow that time out to a couple of minutes or as long as you need to be. Point number 2, distractions. These can be created by stressing any of your dog's 5 senses: hearing, sight, taste, touch, or smell. Anything that creates a stress to your dog's performance. So it could be bouncing a tennis ball, or once you give your dog the taste of a great treat, he might not want to tug, or the sound of a squeaky toy. It might be somebody coming up and touching your dog while they're trying to work, or it could be the lure of a smell of a great big bowl of treats. You can stress any one of those 5 senses on your dogs as a way to distract them away from what they should be doing. Third element is the distance away. Now, this is indeed a massive stress to our dogs. It can be how far away you are from your dog while he's working any skill, or more commonly, it'd be how far away you are working your dog away from something he either loves or afraid of. So there you have it. Those are 3 of the stresses or categories of stress that you might work into your training. But let me tell you, I have a slightly different approach to the strategy of applying stress, or distractions if you like, to training. Rather than just teaching the dog to perform his job while you throw a bunch of overbearing distractions at him, what I like to do is first teach the dog what an appropriate response would be anytime he sees a distraction. To create this understanding, I work on distractions away from any other major formal training. Crate games is the first place my dogs have ever seen any distractions, and if you have my DVD, you know what I'm talking about. Here, the dogs are learning to make great choices without you ever having to say anything to them, to touch them. All that you have to do is close the door after a poor or inappropriate response. The dog's never scolded, but he is massively reinforced when he makes good choices. These good choices add layers of understanding and allow me to move on to test understanding with new and more intense stresses. We have taught him through crate games what an appropriate response to these stresses are. Nothing. Stay engaged. Keep doing what you're doing. Good things are happening. Now, key point number 4 in your framework, is to break your goal of the desired behavior into small, manageable responses that you can train individually. A behavior chain or skill can be broken down into smaller behaviors, and a behavior can be then broken down into smaller desired responses. If you're trying to teach your dog how to extend his rear leg straight out behind him above his back, that's a pretty complex skill compared to, say, teaching him to touch his nose to your hand. One requires a great deal of chunking down, and the other doesn't. Next, consider the complexity of the nature of the environment that you want the finished product to be performed in. Teaching a dog to come most of the time when you call him when you two are alone in the kitchen, it's going to be a lot easier than getting that dog to reliably come to you with one cue under any environmental distractions that you believe he's going to face throughout his lifetime. And lastly, you need to consider the complexity that comes along with the natural drives of that dog. Teaching a beagle to find your keys is going to be a lot less complex than, say, teaching a Pekingese to perform the same skill. The beagle comes with natural drives that you can use to your great advantage when designing a scent training program. Take into consideration the level of complexity for the skill being taught to the dog you love, and build in the necessary layers of foundation to bring you to the success you desire, rather than using your breed or perceived shortcomings of that individual dog as an excuse to accept mediocrity. Regardless of where you're starting from or where you're aiming to go with, if you break those skills down into clear layers of understanding, you're going to create the confidence in the dog to keep moving forward and readily accept more and more complexity in your training. The 5th and final key in your inspired training framework is to be strategic in how you build value for correct choices, and at the rate you increase that complexity in your training. We often refer to the early stages of training around here as value building stages. Here, you've got to manipulate the dog's environment so that the obvious choice, the choice that you want your dog to make, is extremely easy and attractive to the dog. The wrong choice, although difficult, is never going to be impossible, because we do want to see the dog make his own what choice. However, the key at this stage is that you've got to be able to control access to any reinforcement that dog's going to receive if he chooses incorrectly. Let's say, for example, You're training your dog's recall. You've done a few reps at home. He's doing great. You've just been working you and your dog in the backyard. Things are going pretty well. So you make the decision. You're going to try to increase the challenge by doing a recall at the park. Now here, if the dog chooses incorrectly, rather than coming to you, he decides to chase a squirrel, you've lost control of the reinforcement he's going to receive. Remember, reinforcement builds behavior for choice. Your dog has just made two powerful choices. First, he chose not to come when you called him. Second, he chose to chase the squirrel. Both of those choices got reinforced by the act of him chasing. Now, this is something that I just never want to see happen with my own dogs. Sure, occasionally things happen, but my goal is I don't ever want inappropriate reinforcement happening for behaviors that are outside my reach. Your goal is to manipulate your dog's environment so that you are always aware of the level and intensity of the distraction being experienced by that dog. Any distractions or stresses the dog sees will not happen by chance, but will be strategically applied in a way that you can control the outcome of a poor choice. With this in mind, don't be in a hurry to leave the early value building stages of training to test your dog's understanding by throwing him in the deep end of the pool. Before you ask for a really complex skill off leash at the bunny farm, you want to make sure you've put in tons and tons and tons of foundation layers of good choices. Without including any of those necessary layers of understanding to help build value for the right choice, success is going to elude your dog. Now, my training mentor, animal great Bob Bailey, cautions us to use a rule of 80% success. When you're working with your dog, you want to aim for the animal having 80% success at any one skill or response before you increase the challenge and add complexity to your training. Now, depending on the skill, it may take one session to get you there, or it may take many. If you've broken down the behavior for your dog and properly manipulated your environment for your dog's current level of understanding, you should progress to your next layer of inspired skill training very rapidly. You continue on this value testing stage of training, evaluating your dog's responses as you add complexity to the environment, allowing for failures, but having that 80% rule be your guide. And your dog's understanding is strengthened through the massive value of reinforcement that he receives from you, coupled with that power that his correct choice brings him. This takes us to the top layer of understanding, that layer that I'll call mastery. Here you can throw any distraction at your dog and he just won't get it wrong. You can be any distance away, generate any over-the-top atmosphere of excitement, and still your dog keenly shows that he understands what you want by making the correct choice time and time again. It's as if the dog is on autopilot. There's no thinking in that moment that has to happen. The dog instinctively gets it right, as if those choices have been genetically programmed in him from birth. Those foundation layers are a critical part of creating mastery of understanding in any skill for your dog. Design each layer into a reinforcing game that both you and your dog will love to play, and your job as a dog trainer will never seem like work to either of you again. This is a powerful formula for making a change to any unwanted behavior, something that your dog has right now that you're concerned about. But if you share my ultimate goal of synchronized desires, imagine what an amazing working relationship you can have built into every new skill you train with your dog. That is the power of my upcoming online Recallers program. Here we are going to strategically build in elements that help to make training addictive to the dog, which ultimately helps to make you his drug of choice. Synchronized desires. I'm going to have more on Recallers and the program later this week. We're going to open up registration at the end of the week. I look forward to reading your comments and answering any questions that you have about this one-of-a-kind relationship building program. Thank you for watching, and here's to you synchronizing your desires.